Breakfast at the tea shop. It was a cool and peaceful morning. I woke up earlier than usual. The soft sunlight was entering my room. I looked outside and saw the quiet street. The weather was pleasant and fresh. I decided to go for a morning walk. I quickly got out of bed. Then I washed my face and got ready. I wore a comfortable shirt and trousers. Before leaving, I looked at the clock. It was still early in the morning. My family members were busy with their work. I told my mother that I was going for a walk. She smiled and said, "Do not stay outside for too long." Then I opened the front door and stepped outside. The streets were still quiet and peaceful. Only a few people were walking outside. Some shopkeepers were opening their shops. I could hear birds singing in the trees. The fresh morning air made me feel energetic. I slowly walked towards the market. As I walked, I looked around the road. Everything seemed calm and beautiful. After a few minutes, I started feeling hungry. I had not eaten anything before leaving home. I wondered where I could find something to eat. Then I noticed a small tea shop near the market corner. The tea shop was small but looked clean. A pleasant smell was coming from inside. It smelled like hot tea and freshly cooked breakfast. I became even hungrier after smelling the food. I decided to stop there for breakfast. As I walked closer, I looked inside the shop. A few customers were sitting at small tables. Some people were drinking tea and talking quietly. The shop owner was standing behind the counter. He was preparing tea for his customers. Then I noticed someone sitting near the entrance. He was holding a cup of tea in one hand. His phone was in his other hand. I looked carefully and recognized my friend Arjun. He was quietly looking at something on his phone. Suddenly he looked up and saw me. A big smile appeared on his face. He raised his hand and waved at me. I smiled and walked towards his table. Arjun moved an empty chair closer to him. I sat down and said, "Good morning, Arjun." He replied, "Good morning, Nikhil." Then he smiled and said, "I was waiting for you." I looked at him with surprise. I had not told him about my morning walk. I asked, "How did you know that I would come here?" Arjun laughed softly and put his phone on the table. Then he started explaining why he was waiting for me. Arjun smiled and looked towards the market road. He said, "You often come this way in the morning?" I listened to him carefully. He continued, "I have seen you walking here many times." I laughed because he was right. I often walk towards the market before breakfast. Arjun said, "So I thought you might come here today." I asked, "But why were you waiting for me?" He took a small sip of his tea. Then he pointed towards the breakfast counter. He said, "I wanted to have breakfast with you." I smiled and looked around the tea shop. The shop was simple, clean and comfortable. The smell of hot food filled the air. I said, "This looks like a perfect place for breakfast." Arjun smiled and nodded his head. He asked, "What would you like to eat?" I looked at the menu written on the wall. There were many simple breakfast options. I could see bread, eggs and hot snacks. There was also tea and milk on the menu. I said, "Everything looks delicious." Arjun laughed and said, "Take your time." I looked at the counter again. Then I noticed a plate of freshly cooked snacks. They looked hot and tasty. I pointed towards them and said, "I think I will try those." Arjun smiled because he had ordered the same thing. Arjun called the shop owner towards our table. The shop owner came to us with a friendly smile. He asked, "What would you like to have?" I looked at the breakfast counter once again. Then I said, "I would like a plate of those hot snacks." I also asked for a cup of tea. The shop owner nodded and wrote down my order. Arjun said, "Please bring another cup of tea for me too." The shop owner smiled and walked back to the counter. I looked at Arjun and said, "You know me very well." He laughed and replied, "Of course we are good friends." We started talking about our morning plans. Arjun told me that he had finished his work early. That was why he came to the tea shop. He wanted to relax for a few minutes. I told him about my morning walk. We talked while waiting for our breakfast. The tea shop slowly became more crowded. More customers came inside and found empty seats. The shop became full of friendly conversations. After a few minutes, the shop owner returned. He placed 2 cups of hot tea on our table. Steam was rising from both cups. The pleasant smell of tea filled the air. I carefully picked up my cup. I took a small sip and smiled. Then I said, "This tea tastes really good." Arjun smiled and said, "Wait until you taste the breakfast." After a few minutes, the shopkeeper came to our table. He was carrying 2 hot plates of breakfast. He placed the plates carefully in front of us. The food looked fresh and delicious. Steam was rising from the hot dishes. Arjun smiled and said, "This smells wonderful." I picked up my spoon and looked at the plate. There were some hot poha, vegetables, and a few crispy snacks. I tasted the poha and smiled happily. It was soft, warm, and full of flavor. I said, "This is much better than I expected." Arjun laughed and replied, "I told you this place was special." We started eating our breakfast slowly. The shop was becoming busier with every passing minute. More people came in and sat at the empty tables. Some customers ordered tea, while others ordered breakfast. The shopkeeper moved quickly from one table to another. He was serving everyone with a friendly smile. I looked around and enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere. The morning sunlight was shining through the open entrance. A cool breeze entered the shop from the street. I took another bite and looked at Arjun. He was enjoying his breakfast quietly. Then I asked, "Do you come here every morning?" Arjun wiped his hands and looked at me. He smiled as if he had an interesting answer. Then he placed his cup on the table. He said, "Not every morning, but I come here quite often." I looked at Arjun with curiosity. I wanted to know why he liked this tea shop so much. I asked, "What makes you come here so often?" Arjun leaned back in his chair and smiled. He said, "I like the peaceful atmosphere of this place." He looked towards the street for a moment. Then he continued, "It helps me start my day peacefully." I listened carefully while eating my breakfast. Arjun picked up his tea and took a small sip. He said, "Sometimes I come here before going to school." I looked surprised and asked, "Do you come here alone?" Arjun nodded and replied, "Yes, sometimes I do." He said that the shop was never too noisy in the morning. He enjoyed sitting there and watching people pass by. He also liked talking to the friendly shopkeeper. I smiled and said, "That sounds like a nice routine." Arjun replied, "You should join me more often." I looked at my plate and thought about his suggestion. The breakfast was making me feel relaxed and happy. I said, "I think I will come here again." Arjun smiled and said, "Then we can have breakfast together." Just then the shopkeeper came near our table. He asked, "Is everything good?" We both smiled and said, "Yes, everything is delicious." The shopkeeper thanked us and walked away. I looked at Arjun and laughed. I said, "Now I understand why you like this place." Arjun smiled and replied, "I knew you would like it too."